My name is Bernhjelm, and I'm the Vice President of Security for Mall of America. I've been with Mall of America for over 22 years. To be very clear, it was never my intent to be with Mall of America for 22 years. I grew up in a law enforcement family, and my dad was a police officer. After I graduated high school, I wanted to follow in his footsteps, so I went to college to be a law enforcement officer. When I was in college, I joined the Minnesota Army National Guard. And I came out of college and I started immediately looking for police jobs. Back then, it was highly competitive, hundreds and hundreds of applicants for one or two positions. And I got really close at a suburban Minneapolis police department. I came in second out of over 400 applicants. And I was just destroyed. I was super disappointed in myself and just felt like I was never going to get there. So I went in and I talked to the chief, and I said, "Hey, chief, what can I do here to make myself a better applicant?" She said, "Look, you're young, it's a highly competitive market. I just think you need a little more experience." I said, "Great, where can I get that? Because I need actual experience. I can't be stuck behind a desk. I need a full-time job, the student loans are due. Where should I go?" She said, "I think you should go to Mall of America. They run a tight ship, and I think it'd be good for you." So I literally left that interview, drove to Mall of America, picked up an application. 6 weeks later, there I was. So I saw that some of you have been to Mall of America before. We're located in Bloomington, Minnesota. We are an extraordinarily large facility sitting at 5.6 million square feet. We have roughly 500 tenants with around 11,000 employees, depending on time of the year. We're a tourist destination with over 32 million annual visitors. We have free and easy access with 27 public entrances. We are Minnesota's busiest transportation hub that sees over 2 million people come through the transit hub, which is actually attached to the mall. We have 2 hotels that are attached to us as well, one on the north, one on the south side. In the center of the mall, there's a 7-acre indoor amusement park in Nickelodeon Universe. We're certainly an iconic facility with a name that screams capitalism in America, which is great if you love capitalism in America. It's not the case for everyone. So how do we protect it? I just listed a whole lot of challenges. Everybody in this room knows that there is no such thing as 100% security. If there was one silver bullet out there, we'd all be doing it, and we wouldn't be sitting in this room. We have a very robust program with various layers built in. And some of those layers are visible, and some of those layers are non-visible. I use the analogy of Swiss cheese when I talk about our program, because everybody knows that within every layer of security or every layer of Swiss cheese, there's a hole or a vulnerability. However, the more layers that we have stacked on top of one another, the less chance that all of those holes line up at once. So for us, security for our tenants, guests, and employees starts before they ever come inside the mall. We employ an intelligence analyst who's out there proactively looking for threats, usually online. But she's taking in intelligence, validating it. She's sending out intelligence to our partners, whether it's corporate, government, law enforcement. And she's certainly our law enforcement liaison when we get something that we need to push out to them or they need to send to us. She's our point of contact. And she is an absolute wizard at open source information. She can find anything on anyone. It's incredible. We have ALPRs at every single inbound vehicle gates. Now, they're not ours. They are owned and operated by the Bloomington Police Department. But as you can imagine, there is a direct coordination that happens when they get a hit. If they get a hit, say, on a stolen vehicle, they're going to call us immediately. We're going to work with them to get the vehicle on camera, figure out where it parked. And 9 times out of 10, those occupants are apprehended before they ever get into the mall. We have a bike patrol unit that patrols year-round, which in Minnesota is no small feat. It snowed Monday and Tuesday. It's no small feat in Minnesota, especially in January, February, those really cold months. But they're out there patrolling the exterior of the building. the ramps, the parking lots. They're looking for anything suspicious, anyone suspicious. People may be breaking into cars, people who can't find their car. There's around 720-ish, I think I looked last year, people that called us because they couldn't find their car. Turns out they're just in the other ramp. But they're out there helping the guests navigate that. And they're incredibly good at what they do. They're able to efficiently traverse the property and be out there and be one of those highly visible layers. You know, the other two, the intelligence analysts and the ALPRs, maybe not as visible, they're non-visible. But the bike patrol officers are out there cruising around, deterring crime. We had over 8.6 million vehicles come to Mall of America last year. Does anybody want to take a shot at how many vehicle break-ins were reported to us? 7. It's pretty good out of 8.6 million vehicles. Another one of our highly visible layers is our patrol officers. Pretty standard, what you think of when you think of security officers. Uniformed officers, duty belts. They make up the lion's share of the department because they respond to the lion's share of the calls. We expect our officers to respond to pretty much anything and everything that can be thrown at them. They're highly trained, which I'll talk about a little further down the presentation. But they're out there every day taking calls, proactively initiating calls. And it's anything from medicals, serious ones, to Band-Aid requests, dealing with disorderly or disruptive guests, lost kids. We had about 1,500 lost kids last year at the mall. To be clear, we found 1,500 kids. And that number is down significantly, actually. That's down about half from 10 years ago. Turns out when kids get cell phones younger and younger, that number drops. About 85% of our patrol officers will move on to be law enforcement officers at some point in their career. Roughly a third are either current service members or veterans. Another one of our highly visible layers is our parental escort policy. So this policy was started in 1996. The mall opened in 1992. This policy was started in 1996 in response to a significant juvenile crime problem that we were having. It was the mid-90s. It was like the height of the starter jacket. We very quickly became the town babysitter, where people would just drop their kids off at the mall and expect us to deal with it. As it turns out, teenagers are not great at making decisions in the absence of parental supervision sometimes. So they would just run amok, and we would have no way to deal with them, essentially. So we started this policy in 1996, and at the time it said you have to be over 16 years of age to be in the mall after 6 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. Within a year, we had significantly decreased the juvenile crime problem in our county, and we've only expanded it since. So we started Fridays and Saturdays at 6 p.m. A few years later, we moved it back to 4 p.m. A few years after that, we actually enforced it all day in between Christmas and New Year's. Today, that policy is enforced every single day, starting at 3 p.m. We weren't, I don't believe, the first ones to implement this type of policy, but now these policies are becoming the norm all over the country. They're not all exactly like ours, but they're very, very similar. And it's obviously retail centers like ours, but it's movie theaters. It's amusement parks. I even saw recently that some big box retailers had implemented some type of parental escort policy, which kind of blew me away. Another one of our highly visible layers is our canine unit. Everybody loves the canines. We started our program in 2002 in response to 9/11. At the time, it was one dog trained in explosive detection. Fast forward, we've evolved the unit, we've expanded it, and in 2023, we added firearm detection to their capabilities. So all of our dogs can not only detect explosives, but now they can detect firearms on people. I don't just mean in a static bag over there or in a field or what have you. I mean, when people wear a firearm into the mall, the dogs can sniff it out. They're all trained in-house. To get both through the explosive and firearm detection, it takes roughly 12 to 16 weeks, depending on the handler and the dog proficiency. And I'll say that we have one of the most incredible dog trainers on staff. He's literally grown up with it. His dad was a canine officer in a suburban law enforcement agency in the Twin Cities. He started his own canine school. So our supervisor grew up with it, and he and his dad have literally trained hundreds and hundreds of dogs throughout the Twin Cities. He'd often joke that when they would go on spring break, like I just went on spring break with my family last week. We took a beautiful vacation. For him, they would go to dog trials. And he and his brothers would have to hide in the boxes as the decoys so the dogs could find him. Like, that's some serious dedication. But he is incredible at what he does. All the dogs are certified through the National Order Recognition Test and the United States Police Canine Association, which is the same certification as law enforcement. Because of our facility, we are often asked to host trainings with our law enforcement partners. We have a very unique environment for these dogs to train in that they don't often get exposed to, whether it's offices, warehouses, loading dock, movie theater, amusement park. Not many dogs are exposed to a roller coaster zipping over their head, but we offer that, and so we're a very attractive training spot for our law enforcement partners. All of our dogs are trained on live explosives. We're licensed to hold explosives through the ATF. The training doesn't stop with that initial 12 to 16 weeks either. They're constantly training, minimum of 4 to 5 hours every single week, and they respond to roughly 1,700 calls every single year. And I don't mean as an entire unit, I mean as individual teams. Then everybody always wants to know, what happens to the dog at the end of the shift? Right? Do they stay at the mall? What happens? They go home with the handlers. So when they're not at work, they become part of the family. We've worked really hard at our reputation in the canine world. And I think we've earned it. I would put our dogs up against any other dog out there. They're incredible. To the point that in 2022, we got approached by ESPN and the American Kennel Club because they wanted to do a story about our canine unit, which was incredible. So I have a short clip that I'll play here. And it features our canine unit, Kenny, our supervisor, and it walks through the firearm detection piece and kind of how it looks.
For the dog to relate to the training situations, you try and make it as real world as you can. So what we did earlier today was we set up a scenario where we had a decoy, as we call them. She had a concealed firearm on her, and then it's our job to essentially pick her out as she walks by. What a good girl! And then what we do is as soon as our dog gives us an indication, which in this case is the dog will pull into the odor, we take out our toy and we throw it.
Back to the non-visible layers. We have an undercover behavior detection unit. So these are plainclothes officers that are out there proactively looking for suspicious behavior, suspicious objects, suspicious vehicles. They're focused on intent as opposed to just means or the weapon. And there's a ton of people that walk around with weapons that aren't threats because they don't have intent. So their job is to go and figure out, why is this person acting the way that they are? They're trying to identify these possible aggressors' methods of operation, or AMOs, which is behavior, tactics, techniques that aggressors have used when conducting an attack. They're looking for folks on the pathway to violence, in that research, preparation, probing phases, and trying to disrupt that. If somebody meets the criteria and suspicious behavior is detected, they'll go up and they'll conduct a security interview. They'll identify themselves as security officers, show them their badge and their ID, and they'll have a very casual conversation. Try to figure out why they're behaving the way that they are. Hey, I'm Officer so-and-so. What brings you to the mall today? Great. Where are you from? What are you looking for? But they're trying to figure out why that person is behaving the way that they are. Are they nervous and sitting in one spot for an extended period of time and hyper aware of their surroundings, sweating because that they're here as like a rehearsal for an attack? Or they're probing us? Or are they nervous because they're there to meet their Tinder date for the first time? It's their job to go and figure that out. Look, our officers are incredibly good at knowing what the baseline is for our facility. So when people deviate from that baseline, they're very good at picking them out and interacting with them. When I say covert and overt elicitation, covert, obviously, again, they're plain clothes, they're patrolling, they're picking people out. When I say overt elicitation, I mean that sometimes we will place uniformed officers, whether it's our patrol officers or canine officers, at entrances to the mall. And we'll place the behavior detection officer behind or to the side of them. And they'll look at people's behavior as they're coming into the mall and how they're reacting to that uniform or to that canine. And they're a very busy group as well. They conduct around 1,000 security interviews every single year. Staying with the non-visible layers, our training department. This is something that, there's a lot of things here that I've already talked about that kind of set us apart from others in the industry, but this is the one I think that really is kind of the bedrock to what we do, and that's training. It's something that is incredibly near and dear to my heart. When I started at the mall, I worked for about a year, and I got deployed to Kosovo with the National Guard. I came back to the mall. I worked for about 6 months or so. I got promoted into the training department. I loved that job. Didn't last very long, though, because about 5 months after that, I got deployed again. This time, I got sent to Baghdad. I was an infantry guy, and we did patrols every single day in and around Baghdad. When I came back to the mall after that tour, it was important to me to bring back some of the principles that I learned over there and implement them in the training department. When we were in Baghdad, we would do some level of training before every single combat mission. We did over 400 combat patrols. And every single day, we would do some level of training. Not like some elaborate thing where everybody's sitting in a classroom with a PowerPoint or anything like that. It's sitting in the motor pool. Hey, if this happens, what are you going to do? If this happens, what are you going to do? What's your job if this happens? You'd think by like the 250th time of going over this that we would be like, okay, I got it. But we didn't. Every single day, we drilled that down. So when something did happen, everybody knew their job, and everybody knew their role, and they just operated like clockwork. So I kind of brought those principles back. When I got back to Mall of America, I was put in charge of the training department. I rewrote the curriculum. I took things out that I didn't think were necessarily applicable or looked at how they could be trained differently. I added things in. I took the field training program, which when I went through was pretty good. When I started, it was 2 weeks in a classroom and then 3 to 5 weeks of on-the-job training. It's pretty good. Expanded that when I got back to 3 weeks in the classroom. Instead of 3 to 5 weeks, we went to 8 to 12. So when officers start with us, they start their career in the classroom, like I mentioned, for the first 3 weeks. Excuse me. Can you go back one? There we go. They start their career in the classroom, and they're learning the basically foundational building blocks of their jobs, whether it's tactical communication, crisis intervention, counterterrorism. There's an entire week spent on use of force, all the medical training, AED, first aid, Narcan, CPR. But it doesn't end there. Assuming they pass the classroom, they're passed to a field training officer, and again, that's where they spend 8 to 12 weeks learning on the job. Every single year, on top of that, our officers are required to go through a 40-hour annual in-service training. So by the time folks are completely through the training cycle, they've had over 500 hours invested in them before they ever take a call by themselves. So why do we do that? That is an incredible commitment, and it's very resource intensive. It's because we need independent thinkers out there who can go out there and respond to calls, think on their feet, stay creative, stay flexible, make good decisions. We accomplish that through training. I can't have observe and report staff who need to call a supervisor or the police every single time they need to make a decision. It doesn't work in our environment. So we invest all of the training on the upfront to get the product we want on the back end. A couple years ago, there was a well-known security expert who commented to me like, I was looking at your training program and, 500 hours, that's a lot. He's like, the national standard's like 40 hours, right? I said, I do know that, but that doesn't work for us. Staying with the non-visible layers, our dispatch team. These folks are very similar to a 911 call center. They work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we have roughly 65,000 calls for service every single year. These folks are responsible for the phones, the radios, the video surveillance system, the computer-aided dispatch software, the parking software. All of the alarms come through dispatch, all the fire alarms, all the other alarms come through there. Lockdown procedures are initiated through dispatch. They're our direct line with our supporting law enforcement agencies. They can literally pick up the phone. They don't even have to dial it, and it'll ring on the other end to our supporting law enforcement agency, Bloomington Police. And while they're handling all of the security calls, they're also handling calls for other departments as well. So if somebody spills a soda, they can call our dispatch team, and we'll send the housekeepers to go and clean it up. If somebody notices that an escalator, an elevator is broken, they can call our team, and we'll send maintenance to go and fix it. As you might imagine, we have a very extensive emergency preparedness plan that's modeled after the National Incident Management System. We do tabletop exercises every single year with our police, fire, and ambulance services. We do full-scale exercises every 3 years with those same partners, in addition to mall staff. We train all of our employees in workplace violence, active shooter, run, hide, fight. But on top of that, our behavior detection team will go out and they will hit roll calls for the housekeepers, for the ride operators, for the maintenance folks. And they'll train them, not to the level that they're trained, but they will train them and to recognize what's suspicious, what doesn't fit, who doesn't fit. So for us, it acts as a force multiplier. I mentioned our lockdown procedures. They're all initiated through our dispatch center. We've had lockdown in place since 2009, and we were the first mall in the country to implement lockdown procedures. We practice our lockdown procedures 1 day a month. We do one drill in the morning, and we do one drill in the evening during retail hours. We obviously cannot do it alone, though. We rely on our law enforcement partners, and we have great relationships with our law enforcement partners at the local, county, state, federal level. Bloomington Police, our main supporting agency, has a dedicated mall unit, which is an incredible asset to have at our facility every single day. It's made up of police officers who are there to work in Mall of America every single day. It's not like they're out patrolling throughout the city and just responding to calls at the mall. They're stationed and officed out of the mall. So when they come to work every day, they come to the mall. We get to know their staff. They get to know ours. We have regular meetings with their command staff. It's a great relationship. So in 2022, we had some very significant challenges at Mall of America. We had 3 shootings and an armed robbery. One of the shootings ended in a homicide. We had never seen that level of violence in our entire existence prior to that point. We had one shooting, I think, in the early 90s, 92 or 93, and then nothing for 29 years. And all of a sudden, in 1 year, bam, bam, bam. So it really forced us to look at, are we doing things the right way? Do we have the right programs and practices in place? And all the stuff I talked about just now, that was all in place prior to 2022. So then it forced us to look at, okay, what else can we be doing? Let's look at how we can leverage technology to help us accomplish the mission. So we looked at integrating their lockdown procedures. We learned very quickly in the lockdown process, when it was live, that it is chaos. And the process was originally, one person would have to make a radio announcement, one person would have to send the mass notification message, one person would have to physically get up and go to the panel with the hand mic and initiate the tones and then talk over the PA to let people know we were going into lockdown. Didn't work well. So we decided to look at vendors that could help us with this. And now we found a vendor that has completely integrated all of these things into one. And it's a one-button solution through a web interface. So if we need to go into a lockdown or even initiate a drill, they literally go to that web page, click one button, and it all goes. The radio announcement goes, the mass notification, text, email, phone call, the tones and the message plays throughout the mall. All of the digital signage in the mall flips to say that we are in a lockdown or lockdown drill. All of the digital signage on the exterior of the building flips to say that we're in a lockdown or lockdown drill, and it happens right now. We did a proof of concept with body cams in 2022 as well. We implemented those in the spring of 2023. We evaluated gunshot detection technology as well. So we brought in a couple of vendors, and we wanted to see how they would perform in the mall. We did, at the end of the day, select a vendor and move forward with a gunshot detection system that's been installed and running since fall of last year. And look, I get it. It's a reactive measure. I understand that. But for us, it was about safety and security and getting people out of harm's way as fast as possible. And this helps us accomplish that. The number one question we got after the shootings in 2022 is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? When are you getting metal detectors? When are you getting metal detectors? So we brought in a couple different weapon detection companies, and we tested and evaluated them at one of our busier entrances. At the end of the day, we did not move forward with that technology because we didn't feel like it was a good fit for our environment. We are very different than where you may see these traditionally operate. I'll use US Bank Stadium, for example, because I'm a big Vikings fan. They have 7 public entrances. We have 27. They have maybe 40 to 50 event days a year where they're hosting concerts and other events at the stadium. We have 363 days of operation. When they're operating, they operate for roughly 4 hours at a time. We would have to operate for around 16 hours a day. When you go to a football game or hockey game or baseball, whatever you're into, you guys all know that you can bring a purse that's like this big, and that's it. Whereas our facility, people are bringing luggage. I mentioned the 2 hotels are attached. We're also about 2 miles as the crow flies from MSP Airport. When we did this trial, I was actually shocked at the amount of people that were coming from the airport just to visit us on like a layover. Shocked. So people are bringing their full luggage into the mall. Strollers, backpacks, laptops, you name it. What we found was that the secondary screening rate was incredibly too high. If we would extrapolate those numbers out, it would be in the millions and millions of people every single year just based on the visitors that we see. So we decided not to move forward with that. But what we did was we pivoted again, and we trained the dogs to detect firearms on people instead. And the last thing we evaluated was facial recognition technology. We evaluated facial recognition technology originally back in like 2018. And we didn't feel like at the time that it was necessarily a good fit with the technology or the existing cameras we had at the time. But for us, it was one of the areas in 2022, I mentioned all the other testing that we did, that we needed to look at again. Technology moves very fast these days, as everybody knows. So we went out and we brought in 4 vendors and we tested them in our facility as a proof of concept. There was 2 vendors pretty early on where it was pretty clear that it wasn't going to be a good fit. But at the end, we had 2 that were pretty good, and we wanted to kind of do a head-to-head showdown. At the end of the day, we did move forward with one because one significantly outperformed the other. And that group is a group called CoreSight AI. They're our facial recognition software vendor. Once we had CoreSight selected, we obviously dug into how they had performed in the National Institute of Standards and Technology testing that they went through. We dug into how they performed in the Department of Homeland Security testing that they went through. And we were very, very comfortable with those results. So we decided to go down the path of implementation. We had to just start with how not to do it. There are some very public cases out there of folks using facial recognition I'll say perhaps the wrong way. And so there was a very public case that came out where the FTC said, nope, retailer, you're banned from using facial recognition for the next 5 years. And if you want to use facial recognition in the future, here's what you need to do. Turns out that was incredibly helpful for us. We followed their blueprint, which was incredible. So how does our system work? And in the facial rec world, there's essentially 2 types of systems, one-to-one and one-to-N. One-to-N systems are kind of like the big brother, what you think of. They can take your image, throw it out on the open source internet. They can see if you've got any public photos on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Wikipedia, you name it. They can figure out who you are, where you're from, all that. That is not our system. Our system is a one-to-one system. It's a closed loop, and I often use a smartphone analogy. Like, I have Face ID enabled in my smartphone. So my phone has my face stored in its database. When I look at my phone, it scans my face, it unlocks. If I were to hand my phone to any one of you, it would scan your face, and not only would it not unlock, but it wouldn't store your face in its database either. And that is how we're using our facial rec system. We had to figure out who we're looking for. We came up with a list. We call them persons of interest, or POIs. The obvious one was those that are on a trespass. So anybody who gets arrested at Mall of America gets a trespass. It's either a 1-year, 10-year, or lifetime ban, depending on severity of offense. After that, we had to figure out, because not everybody fits neatly into that box, who else could be on this list. And it's those who may be a direct threat to our environment, those made known to us by law enforcement, or those who may be missing or in danger. So what happens when we get an alert? When we get an alert or a possible notification, it triggers in our dispatch center. They get an alarm, and what that does is it triggers up to a 3-level human review. Look, as good as CoreSight is, we are not going to trust the tech alone. They're 99.3% accurate, which is incredible. Again, we're still not going to trust the tech alone. We're going to rely on the human verification. So the dispatch team, they get this notification. They do their own individual comparison, and they say, yep, I think that's the right person. They will send it out to the staff. The officers on the floor will get it on their phones. They'll look at it and do their own independent evaluation, say, yep, I think that's the right person. Once they see the person in the mall, they confront them. Now they have a live person with the picture, and they do another verification just to make sure it's the right person. We have hammered into the staff over and over and over that just because we get a notification, that doesn't mean anything. Again, we're not solely reliant on the tech. They need to go out and verify that it's the right person. After they verify the right person, we follow standard procedure from there, which can depend on the situation. It may lead to an arrest. We may walk the person out for the day. We may call law enforcement. It just kind of depends what the offense is. So our facial recognition technology has a very narrow purpose, and that is security and safety only. We are not retaining any information on non-POIs. I mentioned those 4 categories of POIs. When you walk into our facility, it's scanning your face, and it's saying, are you on this list? If yes, we get the notification. If no, that image is gone. It goes away. We are not storing any data on non-POIs. We're not tracking our guests' movements through the mall. We're not figuring out where they're shopping or how much time they're spending in the facility. Again, we're not trying to ascertain who they are, and we're not retaining any information on those non-POIs. It's, are you on this list? Yes or no. That's it. So how do we get from point A to point B? It was a lengthy process. One of the first things we did was we engaged a third-party legal expert who is an expert in facial recognition and the laws surrounding it. It's kind of a murky world out there in the facial rec world, depending on state by state. But he helped us navigate how to do it responsibly and do it the right way. He helped us navigate the FTC mandates, and the guy is absolutely incredible. We engaged our VMS and our reporting software partners to make sure that CoreSight would integrate with them. We performed a data protection impact assessment to make sure that we were adequately addressing any privacy concerns that were out there for our consumers. We upgraded all of our servers because we selected high-performing 4K access cameras to run this system on. We could have chosen to run it on all of the hundreds and hundreds of cameras that we have, but we chose not to. We wanted incredibly high-performing cameras dedicated to this alone. So they're running on a separate system. Additionally, we updated all of our mall rules that are posted at every single entrance. We created a dedicated facial recognition web page. So if you go to mallofamerica.com/FRT, you will see exactly how we're using our facial rec. We trained our staff not only in policy and how to interact with people with facial rec, but how to recognize morphological features in people's faces, and we continue to do that today. We engaged our state and local government officials because shortly before launch, Minnesota passed a law, a biometrics law, that said you can't use biometrics for commercial use. But what they did was they carved out a safety and security exemption, which was crucial for us. So we reviewed that bill, that law, thoroughly. We believe we fit into the safety and security exemption based on how we're using the program. We actually reached out, we met with the bill author to talk to him, just to make sure that he agreed with us, and he did. He said, well, it's very clear to me, you guys are using this for safety and security only. We engaged the governor's office. We let them know that we were using it, about to turn it on. We continue to meet with our elected officials and educate them. What we have found is that some just don't understand, one, how we're using it, or facial recognition as a whole. There's a lot of, I think, boogeyman theories out there about facial rec and what it does and doesn't do and how we're using it. So shortly after launch, we were criticized publicly by a couple different groups, some of which were lawmakers. And so we have continued to educate them about our narrow scope and how we're using it. 9 times out of 10, I think they walk away with a much different perspective, and they understand that putting out a statement saying that our system is only 60% accurate isn't true. It's not true. We would never obviously select a system that's only 60% accurate. We did press releases. We engaged the media. We brought the media in. This is a strategy we actually started in 2023. After we had those shootings, we brought the media in. We talked about all the programs and practices I talked about. We gave them a behind-the-scenes tour. When we trained the dogs and certified them in firearm detection, we brought the media back in, showed them those capabilities, brought them in again, which I'll talk about a little further, to let folks know, hey, this is how we're doing it. One of the things the FTC said is you can't hide what you're doing from the consumer. So we said, okay, fine. We changed all the signage at the entrance, so if you come to Mall of America now, you'll see in giant block letters when you enter, facial recognition technology in use. Again, dedicated webpage, did media stories about it, not hiding anything from the consumer. One of the things the FTC also said was that you need to not trust your vendor. Just because they say they're 99.3% accurate, don't trust it. So we didn't. We went out and we hired a third-party professor from the University of Minnesota who's an expert in AI, machine learning, and he dug into the data for us. And he came back and said, nope, what they're telling you is correct. So we did that as well. So now this is one of my favorite parts of the presentation. How is it working? We did this big media campaign. And very quickly, word started spreading, which was great. I'm going to play a little short body cam video here. This is day 2 of having facial rec. The gentleman in a hat is the one that was on a trespass.
Identity is confirmed. I'm just going to escort it out.
Facial recognition is real. Is it?
I
literally was like, you know, I saw that on Facebook.
I can't really talk too much.
So if you didn't catch that, she said, this is day 2, mind you. So I guess that facial recognition is real, huh? And then she says, I saw it on Facebook. Like, perfect. Word's getting out. I love it. Same day, later in the day, one of our very prolific organized retail crime participants comes out. This woman is very well known to us. She has been on multiple trespasses. I'm pretty sure she's well known to every law enforcement agency in the Twin Cities because of her behavior. Normally, she would come out and wear a disguise. She didn't that day for whatever reason. She came out, she flagged in the system, we verified it was her, everybody knew it was her. And she went to jail. She had 10 felony warrants at the time of her arrest. That has an immediate impact on our tenants, who are then not getting ripped off by her that day. My friend Brian. Brian, as you might guess, loves sunglasses. So Brian had come to Mall of America several times and ripped us off for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of sunglasses every time he would visit. This was very frustrating, as you might imagine, because we weren't necessarily getting the information in a timely manner that he was there stealing, and we couldn't catch up to him at the time. So we finally got a good image of him, and our dispatch team, who was incredible, backtracked his movements from the retailer back through his entire stay that day at the mall, out to his car in the parking ramp, which then came through one of our inbound vehicle gates, which has a car counting camera on it, which gave us his license plate. Very helpful. From there, we were able to identify him. Turns out, he was recently arrested in a neighboring city a couple days prior for the same activity in their town. So we made the business decision to upload Brian into our facial recognition system. 2 weeks after doing so, guess who shows up? That night, Brian went to jail. We had a mom call the Bloomington Police Department and say, hey, I need help. My son's in a mental health crisis. I think he's at the mall. I think he's armed with a knife. He's not in a good way. The police dispatcher said, okay, ma'am, can you give us a description? This is the description she gave. That is not helpful in July. Eventually, the police were able to get his photo. The police passed his photo on to us. We sent it out to our entire staff over email as a be on the lookout, and so they could immediately start looking for this gentleman. We also made the business decision to upload him into the facial rec system based on direct threat to Mall of America, missing or in danger. Within 7 or 10 minutes, I don't remember which, he flagged as a notification. We went up with the police, verified his identity. He was, in fact, in a mental health crisis. He was, in fact, armed with a knife. Police were able to take him into custody and get him to the hospital and get the help he needs. So I mentioned how word was getting out. We had day 2 on the body cam. Well, hey, I heard that facial recognition is real, huh? Well, then about a month in, we started seeing it online. So Tiffany is posting about her daughter who went out to the mall to buy her a birthday present. How nice. Her daughter's on a trespass, and she flagged in the system for being on a trespass. Tiffany was nice enough to post publicly for all her friends to see that we have facial recognition. This is incredible. What else is incredible is that almost every one of those commenters is also on a trespass. The woman, Brittany, I've been at the mall for 22 years. I'm pretty sure Brittany's been on a trespass for 22 years. It's wild. They're all commenting. They're all understanding. Fun fact, Brittany, even after this post, decided to come back. She got caught, re-trespassed. But this is marketing I can't pay for. This is incredible. This is targeted to the group I wanted to go to. This one's probably my favorite, my friend Lacey. I'll let you guys read. It's got some very explicit language. Incredible. Thank you, Lacey. Like, again, this is targeted marketing. I can't pay enough money for that. It's great. So the story continues with Lacey. This was in July, she posts this. November 13th, she posts again. She knows exactly when her trespass is up. It's gonna be up in 2 days. I'm gonna go hit Forever 21. Great. You see the gentleman commenting is already putting in his orders for her to take. This is November 13th, and I will never, ever understand this. She understands that her trespass expires on the 15th. She publicly says so. What does Lacey do? She comes back on the 14th. She flags in the system, and by the time we catch up to Lacey in the mall, she's already come in, went into a retailer, stolen items from them, and then we catch up with her. Lacey went to jail. Lacey had 5 felony warrants out for her arrest at the time. We saw this recent example on TikTok. We actually looked for this woman because nobody recognized her, and even our intelligence analysts went back through, and I don't know that she's even been arrested out there. But again, I'll take it. Nobody could find her. I'll take that. She's spreading the word for us. That's incredible. So by the numbers, I looked at the data how we were doing prior to having facial recognition on trespass stops. So this is the old school officers walking around with a sheet of faces, walking around in the mall trying to pick out who's on a trespass and who's not. So I looked at from the day we launched until end of February of 2024, 23 to 24. We had 561 stops. That's pretty good, the old school way, I thought. I looked at the same period after facial rec. There's a 92% increase in the amount of people that were stopping. That's obviously significant. And then I looked at, okay, how does it look month over month? So I pulled that data. You see, July and August are the first 2 months that have the highest numbers. That's because I think word is still getting out, right? But then what you see are those numbers continuing to drop. They drop for several months in a row. December and January, they go back up. December obviously is our busiest month of the year. It gets cold out in December and January. And then in February, they drop back off. So then I was curious, like, how does that correlate with our traffic numbers? Because if our traffic numbers are doing the same, then it's maybe not as impressive, right? If traffic's down, then we're gonna see less stops or whatever. But it's not correlating. The traffic zigzags by month, right? But what we continually see is those number of people that are on a trespass coming out to reoffend go down and down and down. So that tells me, again, that the word is getting out. We're never gonna stop them all, obviously. Some people would just continue to come back to the mall. But this tells me that the word's getting out. I mentioned a few stories between Brittany and Tiffany and Brian and the woman, the prolific organized retail crime participant, Lacey. You know what they all have in common? They've never been back out since their original facial rec arrest. Again, that tells me that it's working. I also looked at, okay, how is this affecting crime and some of the more common calls that we have? So I took 5 different call types. I took all of our theft calls, misdemeanor theft, gross misdemeanor theft, felony theft. I looked at our disturbance calls, our disorderly conduct calls, and I grouped those 5 categories together, and I looked at prior to facial rec. How does that look? And the number kind of goes up and down, up and down. Then I compared it to after facial rec. What you see again is July and August, they're slightly below the non-FRT numbers. But again, word is still getting out. It's also the 2 highest months that we had trespass stops with facial rec hits. After that, for the last 6 months in a row, we've had over a 20% decrease from the previous year, month over month over month. That's incredible. I mentioned our media campaign that we went on with facial rec. And it had a twofold purpose. One, we're not trying to fool the consumer into what we're doing at the mall. We want to educate the public on how we're using it. Since those stories, we've had no questions from employees. We've obviously talked about it with employees. We've talked about it with our tenants in tenant meetings. They have no questions. But it also has the additional effect of getting the word out to the folks we don't want to come to the mall as well. I obviously have a professional interest in keeping the mall safe, and I think that we've built an incredible program with all these different layers, visible, non-visible. But I also have a personal interest in keeping the mall safe. I grew up coming to Mall of America. I grew up just west of the mall. I would come there all the time as a teenager. Not one of the ones creating havoc, to be clear. I met my wife at the mall. We take our kids to the mall. And we want to do everything we can to keep that facility safe based on the significant challenges. I want to thank the folks at the security industry for having me out today and ISC. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell our security story to you folks today. If anybody has any questions, I'll stick around, obviously, but at 11 a.m. today, we are going to do a small roundtable with myself and our facial recognition vendor, CoreSight. If you have any questions, Shai is the man to see if you want to join that roundtable. If you have any questions you want to take offline. Thank you so much, folks, and have a great rest of the conference. Thank you.